The scent of baked apples and cinnamon filled my pristine, minimalist kitchen, a sweet, cloying odor that felt entirely out of place amidst the sleek, sterile surfaces of stainless steel and polished quartz. My mother had arrived carrying her usual offering, a lopsided apple pie in a faded ceramic dish, a relic from a time before I had learned the value of a professional aesthetic. She handed it to my daughter, Lily, who, at 7, was already a connoisseur of my unspoken disappointments. Lily took the pie with a practiced, polite smile, her eyes subtly flicking towards me for approval. The pie was a symbol of everything I had worked so hard to escape, a modest, uninspired life with small, meaningless gestures. "Thank you, Grandma," Lily said, her voice a little too bright. My mother beamed, a simple, pure joy that seemed utterly foreign to me. She was dressed in the same faded cardigan she wore to every family gathering, a testament to her inability to understand that clothes were not just for warmth, but for making a statement. My husband, Mark, walked in, his expression a mixture of feigned politeness and barely concealed fatigue. He had just finished a 16-hour day and was still wearing his suit jacket, its tailored lines looking sharp against the soft, unassuming presence of my mother. He kissed her on the cheek and then took a seat at the kitchen island, his phone lighting up with a new notification. Another bill. Another financial black hole. My mother, oblivious to the quiet tension, began to speak of her latest projects. "I bought the most wonderful yarn this week," she said, her hands gesturing excitedly. "It's alpaca wool. I want to knit a blanket for Lily's bed. And I signed up for a painting class at the community center. Just a little something for myself." My stomach tightened into a knot of cold fury. A painting class? Alpaca wool? Did she have any idea what we were going through? The mortgage on this house was suffocating, a monstrous, living entity that demanded every spare penny. Mark's new business was still in the red, and our savings were dwindling faster than a melting snowflake in July. I felt a surge of hot resentment. My mother, in her blissful ignorance, was wasting money, our money, in my opinion, on frivolous hobbies while we were fighting to stay afloat. I felt a moral duty to intervene. She was clearly incapable of managing her own finances. I saw her as an overgrown child, a person who lived in a dream world where money was an endless resource. I was the responsible one. I was the one with a plan. I was the one who had sacrificed everything for the future of my family. I approached her, my voice low and controlled. "Mother, we need to talk about your spending," I said, my tone a careful mix of concern and authority. "You are not a young woman anymore. You need to be thinking about your future, not about painting classes." She looked at me, her smile gone, replaced by a look of hurt. "But it makes me happy," she whispered. "Happiness does not pay for healthcare, Mother," I countered, my voice hardening. "It does not provide for a comfortable retirement. Your pension is a resource, not a piggy bank for your hobbies." For a long moment, she simply stared at me, a flicker of something in her eyes that I could not place. It was not sadness, not anger, but a cool, detached calm. It was the look of a stranger, a person I did not know. The look passed as quickly as it had arrived, and she lowered her gaze, her shoulders slumping in defeat. I felt a strange flicker of unease, a fleeting sensation of having misjudged something important, but I pushed it away. It was probably just the stress of old age, the beginning signs of her becoming more difficult, more unreasonable. It was nothing. I was in control. The next day, as I looked at my mounting pile of bills, the decision was made. The apple pie sat untouched on the counter, a tangible symbol of her financial immaturity. I had to take a more direct, a more definitive step. I would not just advise her on her finances, I would take them over. I would transfer her pension into an account that I controlled, one that would allow me to manage her money for her, to save it, to make it work for our family. It was a big step, a necessary step, and I planned to do it before the end of the week. The transfer was a simple process. I had found her bank details in a shoebox of old documents and, with my husband's help, meticulously transferred a significant portion of her pension into our joint account. I did not see it as stealing, I saw it as securing a legacy. The money was for her future care, for her grandchildren's education, for the things she could not possibly understand were more important than an endless supply of yarn. When I spoke to her about it on the phone, her voice became thin, almost inaudible. She asked why I would do such a thing. "Mother," I explained, patiently as if talking to a child. "It is for your own good. I am merely managing it for you. You are simply not equipped to handle such a large sum. Now, you can rest easy knowing that your money is safe and being used for its intended purpose." The phone went silent for a long moment. I could almost hear the rustling of her thoughts. The next few weeks were a systematic campaign of isolation. I began by telling my relatives that my mother was becoming frequently confused and forgetful. It was a lie, of course, but a necessary one to ensure that no one would question my actions. I told them she was getting older and was easily agitated, that it was best to give her space. The visits from her sisters and old friends became less frequent. When she would call, I would either not answer or keep the conversation short, telling her that I was too busy with my children and work. She always sounded so defeated on the other end. My husband and I decided that her old, cluttered house was a fire hazard and an eyesore. We agreed that it was time to clean it. During our next visit, while she was taking a nap, we went through her belongings. We threw away decades of old letters, faded photographs, and ancient furniture. I justified every piece of junk we discarded. "This old chest is just a home for dust," I told my husband. "These photos are not even in color. Who would want to look at this?" We sold a few pieces of her antique china online. The money was a small but welcome addition to our struggling budget. She did not need it. We did. One afternoon, I was at her house when she asked me a strange question. "Have you ever spoken to your father's old lawyer?" she asked, her voice soft and full of an uncharacteristic curiosity. "He said something about a special fund for when he passed." I was taken aback. This was a detail she had never mentioned before. "Mother, you are thinking things," I said, my voice sharp. "My father was not a wealthy man. The only money he had was his life insurance, which we already took care of. It is simply a delusion. You need to stop worrying about these things." She said nothing more about it. Her face was blank. My final act of control came with the keys to her car. "I am worried about you on the roads, Mother," I said, taking the keys from her. "Your eyesight is not what it used to be. It is better for everyone if you do not drive." She looked at me, her eyes brimming with tears, and for the first time, she did not say anything. She simply sat down on the sofa, her shoulders slumped in defeat. She looked so small, so utterly broken. I believed I had won. I had fully and completely broken her will. The triumph was intoxicating. After months of this systematic erosion, I felt a flicker of something close to remorse. My mother was so quiet now, so compliant. She had become an unthinking, unfeeling presence in my life, and for some reason, the victory felt hollow. I decided to make a grand gesture, a final act that would make me feel good about myself, a public display of my love that would silence any potential whispers from my relatives. I planned a surprise party for her birthday, a lavish event at a local banquet hall. I invited all our family and friends, framing it as a celebration of her long and meaningful life. I told her to buy a new dress, a beautiful one, and that I would pay for it. She looked at me with a rare, hopeful glint in her eye. She was so gullible. The day of the party, she wore a simple, elegant dress, a contrast to the expensive designer clothes I had bought for myself. As the guests arrived and we began to mingle, I stood up with a glass of champagne in my hand. "Everyone," I said, my voice resonating across the room, "I want to thank you all for coming. We're here to celebrate my wonderful mother, who has recently, and very bravely, decided to retire from managing her affairs. With age comes a need for help, and I have happily stepped in to ensure that she is well taken care of." I then announced that I would be officially taking over her finances, and that my husband and I would be relocating her to a beautiful, assisted living community that specialized in her condition. My mother's face went white. A gasp went through the room. Later that evening, in a moment of privacy, she approached me. The guests were starting to leave, and the room was almost empty. There were no tears in her eyes. There was no despair on her face. Her eyes were as clear and as cold as a winter lake. She looked at me, her gaze piercing through my carefully constructed facade. "Did you truly believe you would get away with this?" she asked, her voice a low, chilling whisper. The question was not an accusation. It was a simple, confident statement of fact. My blood ran cold, but I quickly composed myself. "Mother, you are simply not well," I said, a strained smile on my face. "You cannot possibly remember what you are saying. It is for your own good." I grabbed her arm and guided her towards the exit, my smile fixed and unwavering. I did not see the triumphant, calculating look on her face as she turned her head away from me. I dropped her off at the assisted living facility, an old, dilapidated building that I had found for a fraction of the cost of the one I had described to everyone. I did not even help her with her bags. "I will be back to visit, Mother," I said, a lie that tasted like ash in my mouth. She did not respond. She simply walked inside, and I drove away, a final, cold act of triumph. The months that followed were a blur of newfound prosperity. My husband's new business, funded by my mother's pension money, was flourishing. We moved into a bigger house, bought a brand new car, and enrolled our children in the most prestigious schools in the city. Life was finally what it was supposed to be. I occasionally went to visit my mother, more out of a sense of obligation and to keep up appearances than from any genuine concern. I did not expect to find her in a state of distress. She seemed to be doing well. She was quiet, agreeable, and polite, almost unnervingly so. Her previous outbursts of defiance had vanished, replaced by a sort of docile acceptance that I interpreted as a sign of her finally understanding her place. When she asked for things, she did so with a strange, passive calm. "Could you bring me my old photo albums, dear?" she asked one afternoon during my bi-weekly visit. "The ones from the attic. I would like to look through them." I thought she was simply succumbing to a bout of nostalgia and agreed to bring them the following week. She sat for hours with them, not looking at the pictures, but at the backs of them. I assumed she was just in a sentimental mood, reminiscing about a past that, in my opinion, was hardly worth remembering. I did not notice the small, meticulous notes she was making in a tiny notebook. Then came the stranger requests. One day, she asked for the exact legal name and address of my husband's business, claiming she needed it to write a letter to her bank. I found it strange, but she was so passive that I simply gave her the information. The next week, she asked for my old, battered laptop, the one I had used in college. I was surprised she remembered it. "I want to try to write my memoirs," she said, a small, knowing smile on her face. I scoffed at the idea but brought it to her. I imagined her, in her little room, typing away at a nonsensical story of her uneventful life. It was a harmless distraction, a way for her to pass the time. A few months later, I began to receive strange notifications on my phone. A small transaction from an unfamiliar account, a notification from a banking app one did not recognize. I dismissed them as spam. Then I began to see a strange, black car parked outside my mother's care facility. A sleek, expensive sedan that did not belong there. It was usually gone before I had a chance to get a good look at it. I never thought anything of it. It was probably a new residence car. I was so caught up in my own perfect life that I did not see the cracks starting to form. My sense of unease started to grow. One day, I received a certified letter in the mail, addressed to my husband. It was from a law firm, a name I had never heard of, but it was printed on expensive, heavy paper. The letter stated that they were conducting an inquiry on behalf of a client regarding a financial dispute. The language was vague, and I immediately threw the letter away, not wanting to worry my husband. He had enough on his plate with his flourishing business. I was convinced it was some sort of scam or a mistake. The following day, I received a similar letter, this time addressed to me. The vague language had been replaced with a specific number and an itemized list of what they were seeking. The numbers were staggering, far beyond anything I had ever seen. My heart began to pound in my chest. I called the law firm immediately, but they refused to give me any information. My mother had not been in contact with them. I could not understand what was happening. Everything felt as if it was crumbling beneath me. I knew that something was horribly wrong when a process server arrived at my door with a subpoena, a long and complicated legal document. It named me and Mark as defendants in a lawsuit filed by an anonymous party. The triumphant feeling of control that I had once held so tightly began to slip away, replaced by a cold, numbing fear. It was all a complete mystery to me, a series of illogical events that did not fit into my meticulously planned life. My world fell apart with a sudden and devastating speed. The morning after I received the subpoena, I woke to a barrage of calls from my husband's business partners. His bank accounts were frozen. His assets were being seized. The lawsuit from the obscure law firm had been filed, and the charges were overwhelming: fraud, embezzlement, and theft. The numbers were staggering. It was all a complete nightmare. I ran to our home safe, frantic, my hands shaking. I tried to access our accounts, but every single one was empty. The money from my mother's pension, the funds we had used to start our business, the savings we had accumulated, it was all gone. There was a single, cryptic message on the screen of my computer. I hope you found this useful. It was from an anonymous email address. The final hammer blow came when I received a letter from the bank. My house, our brand new, beautiful home, was no longer ours. It had been sold to a holding company, and we had 48 hours to vacate the premises. My life was in a freefall. The final meeting with my mother took place in the opulent office of a high-powered attorney. She sat across from me, her face expressionless, a picture of calm confidence. She wore a tailored black suit and a necklace that sparkled with a dazzling array of diamonds. She had not been to a care facility for months. She had sold her old car and her old furniture and had been living in a beautiful downtown apartment. "I tried to warn you," she said, her voice soft but firm. "I tried to tell you that you were making a grave mistake. You simply did not listen." My mother then revealed her secret weapon. Her father, my grandfather, had been a financial genius who had made millions in the stock market during his early life. He had died a poor man, a victim of his own generosity, but he had left her a small, hidden trust fund, a small sum of money that was to be her safety net, a last resort in case of emergency. She had kept it secret for her entire life, a carefully guarded secret that had gone untouched. She had been living on her own small pension while her trust fund grew, quietly and steadily, for decades. It was this fund that she had used to ruin me. She had hired a team of lawyers and investigators to track every single one of my fraudulent financial transactions, every single lie, every single act of cruelty. She had, with the help of her legal team, filed a lawsuit, one that had been building for months. My husband's business, my new home, my expensive cars, all of it was now in her control. The woman I had viewed as a feeble, witless victim had orchestrated my complete and utter financial ruin. I looked at her, my mother, the woman who had always seemed so weak, so dependent, and for the first time in my life, I felt a deep, abiding hatred. My life, my beautiful, carefully constructed life, was gone. She had taken everything from me. I never saw my mother again. Her revenge was complete, and she disappeared from my life as quickly as she had appeared. The last time I saw her, she was walking away from the courtroom, her head held high, a small, satisfied smile on her face. I was left with nothing. I was in a state of utter shock, unable to comprehend how I could have been so blind. It was a victory for her, but for me, it was a waking nightmare. I was a failure, and it was my mother's fault.